Welcome to episode number 24 of KC Grid Talk, powered by shopakr.com. My name is Imri Lida, back again for another week, another episode, this time previewing the IAME Grand Nationals heading up this week at the Trackhouse Motorplex. And as always, I've got my two co-hosts with me again, Caleb Vieska. First off, Caleb, going to be on the mic this weekend. It's another IAME Grand Nationals for you, your second so far. How are we feeling this week?
Yeah, feeling good. I mean, we've had a busy year so far, but whenever we see IAME Grand Nationals back on the schedule, we're always super excited. So, I mean, last year went into it pretty new. I believe that was probably my second or third weekend on the mic, and then this year I've had a whole year under my belt. So I'm excited to get back out there and excited to see some good racing.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, second year for you. I mean, we saw a lot of good action last year, a lot of good racing. And hey, now you've got a full extra year of experience under your belt, and it will be an interesting weekend for sure. And another guy who was there last year and has been behind the mic quite a bit this year for Kart Chaser is Alexander Searle. He'll be back again this weekend working for us. Alex, I mean, you were there last year. You got to call a lot of the main events. I mean, how are you feeling heading into this weekend?
Yeah, well, I think Caleb said it best, right? Anytime we get to IAME Grands, it's one of the marquee events of the year here in the U.S. So excited to be back in Charlotte, North Carolina, here at Trackhouse Motorplex in a couple of days' time. And yeah, we're in for a great race as always. It usually puts on one of the best shows throughout the year that we get. So I'm excited.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, again, a long weekend for everyone. I believe this is the most track time of any event that we'll go to the entire season. You get 6 practices on Thursday. You get warm up, qualifying, heat 1, and then the shootout races on Friday. Warm up, heat 2, heat 3, and the X30 shootout on Saturday. And then obviously warm up, the super heats, and then a long final on Sunday. So as far as racing action goes, it is the longest race of the year, and certainly one that will be unique. So we get into the event. I want to go ahead and get started with kind of some of the event preview that we've got. So first up, we have the track layouts this year. It's very similar to the layouts that we ran last year because it's the exact same layouts as far as the main action goes. We do not know the layouts for the shootouts that will be run over the course of the nights this weekend. We just know what the warm-up qualifying, heat 1, heat 2, heat 3, super heat, and final layouts will be. And I mean, the first layout of obviously the main layout for Trackhouse Motorplex, only a layout that's been run for about 11 years, 30 national races, not something that a lot of people know. But yeah, so that will be the layout for warm up practices 4 through 6 on Thursday, qualifying and heat 1 on Friday, as well as the super heat and the main event on Sunday. So, and then obviously the switchback clockwise, the same layout that we saw in the IAME X30 shootout in 2022. And then we saw it in Heat 2 and Heat 3 last year. It was kind of the secondary layout for this event. Back again for another year. And Alex, I mean, you see these layouts. We talked last week a little bit about kind of switching up layouts of different tracks. But when you saw that the switchback was announced as the alternate layout for this event, what did you think of it? And do you think it's the best choice that Trackhouse could have made?
Yeah, I enjoy the layout. I think Trackhouse, considering they have so many layouts to choose from, there were a couple they could have gone with, and like you said, we don't know the shootout layouts, so hopefully that'll be different. That'll be one that we've probably all driven on at some point because we're on, like you said, the 4th year of the IAME Grands. There's only so many layouts we can do at these special events. Switchback layout's pretty cool though. I think it adds, I don't say adds passing opportunities, but it doesn't take away a whole lot. The infield section of the racetrack, it's tough to pass on, but it leads to a lot of switchbacks, a lot of double rights, double lefts. So I think it's going to be interesting to see how the drivers kind of navigate this, as it being one of the only times of the year, maybe even the only time of the year that a lot of these guys get to drive this layout, and even the shootout layout that we don't really know yet. The normal layout that we'll see practice 4 through 6 and into the main events. That's the layout that we all know and love around here on Trackhouse. And again, it's one of the best tracks that we go to. It adds so many passing opportunities. But I think with the switchback layout, like I mentioned, I think it adds something on the front straight where you have to kind of dive in immediately to turn number 1. Adds a braking zone there, but you can't defend too much because you have a switchback into turn number 2, and throughout the rest of the racetrack. So I think we saw it last year, provide some awesome racing action. I think it'll do the same this year.
Yeah, and Caleb, again, kind of similar question to you. I mean, you saw both of these layouts, we saw the same layouts last year. You look at into this event, do you think that Trackhouse made the right decision with their layout choices for this weekend?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I really like the switchback layout. It has a very technical aspects as well as the straightaways. So, in my opinion, I mean, it gives it all, and it adds a little bit more of a more of a technical aspect to it with a switchback layout. And I mean, the standard national course. When you go to Trackhouse Motorplex, I mean, what else do you expect than that layout that races so well? I mean, we saw the racing last time for the United States Pro Kart Series. This is the second time we're going to be here this year, so I'm excited for the standard national course.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, we've have so many years of racing on that course. I know a lot of people think that it gets dull after some time, but I really do think as far as layouts of Trackhouse goes, that standard layout, you kind of have to run it because the alternates, they all kind of have some section that gets a little bit Mickey Mouse. I think with the switchback and the reverse switchback both kind of have the least amount of that over the course of the whole track. I will say I was kind of thinking they might try the reverse layout that we saw last year at the X30 shootout. That we didn't get to see them run in the dry, so it's kind of a little bit of caveat. But we raced it at the last local race of 2023, and I felt like it was one of the most fun layouts I've ever driven on. So that was kind of the one thing that maybe surprised me a little bit. But the switchback layouts as reliable as it gets as far as alternates go for Trackhouse. And again, I mean the multi-layout system. It's unique to the IAME Grand Nationals. I don't think we have a single race other than some of the regional Rotax races throughout the year that have kind of multi-layout during the weekend. So I think that's a really cool function. Alex, I mean, having watched this race for a few years now and seeing some of the kind of like intricacies of it, when you see a race that has two layouts, how difficult do you think it is for drivers to navigate from kind of one part of the weekend to the next?
Not so much now. I'd say when the event was first introduced, probably more difficult than it is. But nowadays, in the fourth year Miami Grands, a bunch of repeat entries, some newcomers, right? But with this being a racetrack that so many drivers have been on throughout their career, especially on the normal layout, to go to the alternate layout, if you haven't been here before, okay, it's a bit of a setback, I'd say. But with you get 3 practices on Thursday, most of these drivers are pretty adaptive to what's going on. You have to be on pace pretty much by the third practice on Thursday, or come Saturday you're behind the 8 ball. So I'd say it's still something that you have to re-rack your brain around, because Friday we do the normal layout and then you basically wake up Saturday and it's like, okay, well, now it's a new layout all of a sudden. So don't forget to turn right, I'd say, in turn number one, before the start finish line on Saturday. But other than that, I'd say it's less difficult now for a lot of these drivers. Like you said, we don't get to see it very often, so it is a cool aspect. Like the Rotax stuff, we will usually reverse the layout. But other than that, I think the most difficult aspect is probably the first lap or two, just remembering your markers. But for the drivers who have been here before, especially like last year with it being the exact same layout, I don't think it'll be as difficult as it was maybe when this event was first introduced.
Yeah, absolutely. And so let's get into the schedule for this weekend. It was just announced yesterday. They released all three of the or all 4 days worth of schedule. I only put the first three into StreamYard, so that's kind of on me. But I figured practice is, talking about practice, not really that important to cover. But so this is day one. This is warm up, qualifying, and heat one. One thing that I think is interesting, and it actually starts with a practice day. We're running until 9 o'clock on Thursday. And then on Friday, the KA shootout runs all the way until 10 o'clock. And that means that really the last few sessions of the day, every single day, is going to be at night, which again, it's not quite night fight. I know when we come back in 2 weeks for stars, it's going to be well into like 9:30 or 10, I believe. But certainly that builds some hype. But yeah, I mean, warm up, qualifying, heat one. This is the Friday schedule. You get into the heat races. And one thing I wanted to ask you guys about, and Caleb, I think I'll start with you on this. I mean, each heat race is 15 laps. The super heat is, I believe, 17 to 18, depending on the class. And the main event is 20, 22, and 25 laps. So, I mean, this is a longer event than pretty much any event you see all week or all year long. How much do you think that the long races that we're going to see this weekend kind of change how you approach as a driver? And do you think that we'll see kind of some differences in terms of setup, some differences in how like drivers approach their racecraft decisions based off of the longer heats?
Yeah, no, for sure. I mean, we always talk about this, time and time again whenever we look at longer races or even longer heats as well. We're used to kind of like 5 minute heat races, I guess you could say, throughout some of the national stuff. It's usually 1/3 of the entire race distance. So I think making it almost to half and 2 laps less than the super heats, I think it's going to be super critical for the racecraft of it as well, because you may be able to let some people go, and you won't be as desperate early on in the race to kind of try and make moves and to kind of try and screw some people over or vice versa. So yeah, most definitely. I think the racecraft should improve a lot. It's going to prompt a lot of drivers to really let some others get away early on, and then towards the end of the race, kind of try and catch back up, and then as well as setup stuff, right? You can kind of get an idea of what you need for the long run easier during the heats by the time you get into the main event on that Sunday afternoon, because we know that track development at Trackhouse is always super critical because of how much grip is laid down there and how much driving goes on at that racetrack. I feel like that groove as well this weekend is going to grow even wider the more go-karts that go on there.
Yeah, and Alex, I mean, long heats, short heats, do you prefer the long heats, or do you wish that we made them like 8 laps or 10 laps?
I prefer the long heats. Absolutely. I think, like Caleb said, I'm there's pros and cons to it, right? Short heats, you could argue it's good or bad for the racing. I'd say it creates a little more chaos because drivers are a little bit more of in a panic, in a hurry to get to the front. If you have a bad qualifying, or even if you have a good start, you want to pull away and you want that race over as fast as you can. But for the drivers who maybe qualified mid-pack to the back, who maybe feel like they should be faster or should be further up the field, gives them more of a chance. I think it creates this pretty good parity in the sense that the guys who should be towards the front are probably going to be there. And it's going to give you kind of a good field spread, but it's also going to give these drivers a good sense of tire saving. It's actually going to come into effect when you have shorter heat races. It tends to not be too much of a factor, but with longer heat races, you actually have to think a little bit more throughout the heat races on just your equipment besides the racetrack in front of you or the drivers around you. So I think it adds that aspect as well, which is great. And on a track like Trackhouse, where you could pass in almost every corner, or actually, I'd say every corner, we've seen drivers do it everywhere. We're going to see some awesome racing. And so for sure, I'm always for longer heat races. I think it adds strategy. And at the end of the day, racing is a chess game. And the more that we can make it that, it's the better.
Absolutely. And so here's a look at the rest of the schedule. So on Saturday, of course, the warm up. Then you get into heat number 1, or excuse me, into heat 2 and heat number 3. Again, those are 14, 15 laps depending on the category. X30 will be 15. K senior will be 14. K junior also 14. And then the younger categories will get 13 laps. You get into the X30 shootout, 13 drivers, $5,000 on the line. We've seen some great racing in the X30 shootout. That will be at the end of the day, the nightcap on Saturday. And then we get into Sunday, where all the money's, well, not all the money. I should not have said that, because I literally just said that the shootout pays $5,000 to win. But all of the main event prizes come at the end of the weekend, and it starts out with the super heat on, or excuse me, that's the other way out. My bad. But anyways, Sunday you have the super heats, and then you have the main events on as well. 22 to 25 laps on the main events, 17, 18 laps on the super heat. One thing worth noting, and it's something that we've kind of noticed throughout the years, is the super heat is worth 3 times as much as an individual heat. So it works out to where a bad pre-final / super heat result still only has 50% weight overall. So you can DNF, you can have a crash, and you can still start the final roughly 20th to 25th. In a class like KA or an X30, even, you start well inside the top 15 off of a poor pre-final result. So that's just something that is worth mentioning. It means that you really don't have to have the greatest pre-final, nor do you have to have a great run through all 3 heats. In fact, one kind of nugget that I have from the last few years is in the last 3 years, 2 of the 3 years in KA, the winner finished outside the top 15 in one of the 3 heat races. Joe Tierney finished 16th in heat 1 last year. Connor Zilish DNF'd in one of his heats in 2022. And even in 2021, if you go that far back, guys like Thomas Nunziata had 2 DNFs and still wound up racing for the win at the end of the weekend. So this is one of those races. It's a marathon. You can overcome a bad heat result because of the amount of passing opportunities and because of the format for the weekend. And we have one special guest that has mastered this format that won last year in X30. We're going to be joined after this break by Dalton Hanes. We're going to talk to him about not only what he did last year, but also his weekend, this past weekend at the Rotax U.S. Trophy Final, where he was able to finish on the podium right behind Oliver Hodgson. But first, we have a word from our partners.
Brandon, why are there all these charges for just over $200 from Acceleration Kart Racing's website? That's because AKR gives you free shipping on orders of $200 or more within the continental US. Okay, but I thought you were just getting a pair of gloves. That's what, 70 bucks? But if I'm getting a new pair of gloves, I might as well get a new pair of shoes to match. And then on top of that, I'll get a neck brace because with the shipping, it's basically free. Yeah, I do not think the math checks out on that.
Everything you need, all in one place and shipped to your door for free for orders of $200 or more. Exclusions apply. Spend responsibly. Shop AKR.com.
But we just lost Dalton for a second. He's back now. Dalton Hanes, you waited 18 minutes of us yapping just to get into the show. And then right as we're going to commercial, you leave. But aside from that, how are we doing tonight, man?
I'm great, Emery. Yeah. I don't know what happened with that. But yeah, I'm here now and I'm going to have a good time.
Absolutely. I mean, I see you've got your trophy room looks a bit more filled out than the last time we had you on a podcast. So, I guess first off, recap how this weekend went at Rotax. And also, I mean, you were kind of not the OG crew of KC Happy Hour, but you were on quite a few episodes in 2022. I mean, what's it been like kind of changing, kind of growing through the racing side of things ever since then? Because I mean, man, when we were doing these podcasts a couple of years ago together, you had like maybe 1/5 of the decoration in there.
Yeah. We put a lot of work in the past 2 years, me and my brother, Roman Hanes, we worked really hard. And last weekend I didn't have him. He was working for Xander in Texas. But yeah, we picked up some hardware at the Rotax Grand Finals again. The year before I came third for Rotax and behind Oliver again. This year we went one spot better. But yeah, we got the ticket to Italy, so I'm pretty excited for that one.
Yeah. So, I mean, back with the Race Lab boys on the TV cart, it was kind of a challenging weekend for you. You started out a little bit poor in the practice sessions. You're roughly 8th to 10th. I think you qualified 8th. You're kind of running midway through the top 10 for most of the heat races. I mean, what do you think allowed you to turn it on in the final? Because from what you did in Heat 1 and Heat 2 to what ended up happening on Sunday seemed to be a pretty big difference.
Yeah, so obviously I had 3 guys behind me, right? I had Shane Shipley, who runs Speed Tech Racing. He was my mechanic. I had Craig Feiner, who's the owner of Race Lab TB Kart up in Canada. And then I had, Chris Black for Black Racing Engines for the engine builder. Yeah, like you said, we didn't have a great run of it in qualifying and even all 3 heats. I just had no pace, and I write my tire pressures down in a notebook like every single session, and I write down all the changes we make throughout the weekend in that book. And I'm looking at everything, and I'm like, kart feels amazing, but we just need to figure some stuff out on the engine. And it's my second Rotax race, and the last one I did was exactly last year, the same exact race. And yeah, I mean, karting, it's all about variables and how you can lower the variables to know exactly what you need to change. And I went through all of them and couldn't really find where we were slow. But Chris Black with the racing engines, he did put a lot of work in Saturday night, and we came out Sunday morning looking decent. And then, yeah, as soon as the engine picked up, the kart was already perfect. So we flew with that TV kart through the final, and pressures were right because I knew exactly what pressure to go on because I had experimented a lot with the weekend. And then, yeah, we flew all the way up to P2. Hodgson's gone.
Yeah, 5.2 seconds. And so I guess we talked about the most recent race for you about a week ago, or not even a week ago, like 2 days ago. But one thing I want to do, you started karting at VLK when you were 6, correct?
Yeah, Victory Lane Indoor Karting in Charlotte, North Carolina. Yeah,
Victory Lane Karting when you were 6 years old. So it's been 12 years since then. We like to do this with some of our guests where you kind of hear sort of the full story. And I feel like we've heard a good bit of your story over the years, but I want to go all the way back to the VLK days and kind of work your way forward. So talking about how it was to start with Roman and kind of what's led you up to this point now over the course of the last 12 years or so.
Yeah, so just so we're not sitting here for 3 hours, I'll try to keep it a long story short. But yeah, I started at VLK in rental karting. It was just me, my brother, and my dad. We would drive up about an hour to VLK every single morning or every Saturday morning and do the local races there. I started in the youth league, and I grew up racing against my brother, my older brother Roman. He's about 4 years older than me, and he taught me everything I knew. It got to after about a year of like getting decent. It was literally just me and him, P1 and 2. I think there was like 6 races per season. I would win 2 of them, he'd win 4, and like that was it for like 3 years. And then we raced against the adults the very last year when I was 10. I got into the adult class. They take it serious up there. They had the Indoor World Championships there a couple of years back, which is like a huge event. You wouldn't think rental karting is big, but it's huge. And VLK takes it extremely seriously. So I learned racecraft there, kind of. And then my dad finally, after 4 years in indoor karts, saved up the money to be able to send me and my brother out to GoPro Motorplex. I mean, we knew about it. We wanted to go outdoors, but it just took forever to get out there just to get the money up. And then once we got there, I joined Timmy Tech Racing, and the story just started from there.
Yeah, and so you go outdoors, you kind of spend the first couple of years with Timmy Tech. One of my favorite anecdotes from your story is you actually set on pole in your very first Swift race at GoPro, correct? Yeah, so your very first Swift race, you're on pole. You ran the first couple of years with Timmy Tech, and then kind of talking about how the relationship, A, with your brother, and B, also with your dad kind of evolved from that point forward.
Yeah, so growing up with them, I mean, my relationship has been extremely strong with my dad and my brother, like especially in the VLK days and as we got later on to outdoors. So when I joined Timmy Tech, I don't know how many years I did with them, but I think I did 2. I did 1 in Swift, and like you said, I sat on pole my first race. I was terrified. That was terrible. Like, don't say where we finished. Don't pull up those results. But yeah, so I always had pace. I developed, like I said, developed racecraft. I knew what apexes were. I knew what all that was. So when I actually got out there, it was just learning the difference in power and then the grip, right? So throughout the years, I progressed into the KA junior class. And then as I got into KA junior the first year, we did 1 or 2 races and we were fast. I was on the top cart, but I was on a really used top cart, very old. My brother was also racing. He was on a top cart as well. He did really good his first year. He started in X30 Junior. A lot of kids started in Micro Swift. So he started out in X30 Junior at 15 years old, I think, or 14, because I started when I was 10. He's 4 years older than me. So he started in X30 Junior at 14, and he did amazing. He was doing great. Then when I moved into KA Junior, he moved into KA Senior because much cheaper. I think 2017 KA came out, or 2016 it did. I think it came out in 2016. 2017, yeah. So he moved into KA Senior because it was a lot less expensive. I moved into KA Junior. I had an amazing time in KA Junior. I developed an incredible amount because I was racing against the likes of Brent Cruz, Thomas Nunziata, so many names, Gray Ledbetter, like Luca Mars, a lot of people that are all in cars right now. And I developed amazing, but in that first year, all of us were new to KA Junior. We all moved up from Swift because we were all excited to race KA because it was the next step before you went from Swift to X30. So it was a great step for all of us. So I learned a lot, and my brother did too. He was racing KA Senior against Weston, some old names, Dusty Davis, Weston Workman, Paulie Massimino, right? He was racing against those guys and doing amazing, but as the year went on, our carts got older, and we didn't get new ones. And then one day, my brother decided, he's like, Dad, we really can't afford this. And my dad was like, yeah, I know. And then we made the decision to go privateer. So we weren't paying for tent space or any of that. And rather than having 2 mechanics work on our 2 go-karts, we had Roman work on both the go-karts, right? And we did that for about half a year to a year. And remember, Roman is now, 16 years old, 15 years old. He's 15-year-old working on 2 go-karts. His younger brothers and mine. And half the time, we showed up 1 to 2, 3, 4, like 1 race every other race at GoPro because we couldn't afford to do all 12 club races. And think about a 15-year-old nowadays working on 2 go-karts by himself, right? And my dad, he helped out, but he wasn't always at the races. So most of the time, my mom would take us to the races because my dad was on the road. So a lot of rear bumpers fell off that first year of him working for me and working for himself. And then he got tired. He got burnt out. He's 15 years old, right? So he decides, Dad, like, I can't do this anymore. He was putting me before himself and he wouldn't even make it on track half the sessions. So what ended up happening was he said, Dad, like, and keep in mind, my brother was more talented than me when I grew up, like when we were younger, and he still decided to pull the plug and say, Dad, we don't have enough money. I'm 15. I don't have a real chance of making it professionally. He was very honest with himself and said, we need to, 2 go-karts too expensive, but if we sell both crappy go-karts and buy one good go-kart, then maybe we have a chance with one of us. And I was 4 years younger, I'm 10 years old. Well, I think maybe 11 at the time. And I was progressing good. I had a lot of good company around me. My brother realized that, and he's like, I can coach him. Like, Dad, I can get us there, right? So he decided to just quit. Just flat out said, I'm done. And then we obviously sold both the top carts, bought a Tony kart. Not saying that Tony kart's any better than top kart, just saying we had old top karts. We wanted to see what a Tony kart was like. We heard it was easier to drive. So we moved to Tony kart, and that's when the story really got started. He got a lot better at mechanicking. The engines, everything was better because it was just a lot more money around for my dad. And then it was just me and him. When he hit 16, he got his license, and he would just drive me to the track. We do practice days. And yeah, so that's the real start at go-kart for me.
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, Dalton, funny that you mentioned that, because I actually got to spend a lot of time with Roman. Obviously, this past weekend he was working with Xander, and we spent a lot of time together with him. And I kind of got talking to him and asking him how you guys actually started. And funny enough, he always does say that he probably still thinks he's better than you if he had as much seat time as you, and he was able to get back in the seat. Even this weekend, there was times where he wanted Xander out of the seat and he wanted to put himself in. He's like, you know what, dude? I think I could do a better job. I think I could do a better job. Or even if they were selling a go-kart there that weekend, he was like, I think I'm going to buy it and just do heat 1 and heat 2 and 206 senior and do it that way. But I mean, when you mentioned that, and I guess you talk about whenever Roman was 15, and then you look at it now, and he's one of the most sought after mechanics in the karting paddock. And you're one of the most sought after drivers in the karting paddock as well. So, and coaches, I mean, I guess we could say as well. So, kind of after Trackhouse, you kind of progressed into what you are now. So I guess what's the story been like since Trackhouse to now for yourself and Roman?
Yeah, so a couple people have heard this story. So this is like a couple of years after my brother was my mechanic, right? So I was 11 when he started being a mechanic. When I hit 13 years old at the very end of the year, I'm about to turn 14, and we are looking like we're running out of money, right? It's been 3 years in KA Junior for me, I think almost 4. And at this point, like, my dad spent a lot, like KA Junior, like we didn't grow up with go-karting money. We didn't grow up with car racing money, right? So my dad's struggling, right? He's paying all the bills, and he's like, I don't know if we can really afford this anymore. And he goes, I got enough money for about another race or a national race or a whole year. Like, a national race is around, like, if you don't have anything, you don't have a go-kart, you don't have an engine, any of that, national race can be like $10,000, $12,000, maybe $13,000, maybe more, right? So my dad decides, we're like, do we want to do a whole club season or one national? It was the first year IAME Grands was coming out. We heard about it. So we're like, Kart Chasers filming stuff. What if we do a national? But the thing was, I was in KA Junior, right? And KA Junior, you win a KA Junior race, everyone's like, oh, that's cool. Like, who's that kid, right? They don't think, oh, let's go sponsor that kid. So as soon as I turned 14, we decided, hey, why don't we just put him in X30 Senior? If this is going to be his last race, send it. You know what I mean? Put him out there against the best in the country, right? Put him out there against Norberg and everyone, right? So that's what we decided to do. We decided to, my dad bought a go-kart, rented engines from the only people that we really knew were good with them with BBS race engines, and used them in KA. They were amazing X30 engines, and I think I did one KA senior race at the very beginning of the year, and the next 2 races were I did two X30 senior club races. I'd never even driven an X30 junior, not a single race, right? So KA junior, and then 1 senior race, which I got to the front, right in front of Paulie, blocked all of lap 4, 5, 6, got punted way out the way. Learned my lesson there. Don't block on lap 4 in front of Paulie.
In front of Paulie.
Yeah. And then, so then I got the next X30 senior race. I came like 4th, right? Just killed someone in the last corner trying to pass for 3rd. I think it was Brian Boley. Sorry about your chassis. Sorry. And then the next race was the club race the weekend right before IAME Grands. That club race, I met Norberg, got to meet him for the first time. Remember, Ryan had a big channel back then. Kart Chaser wasn't huge. So I knew who he was. I went up to him, talked to him a little bit, and he learned that it was my second ever X30 senior race. And then I qualified third, he qualified fifth, and he was kind of scratching his head on the grid when he saw me. He knows it's my second ever X30 race. And then in the pre-final, I won that, and Paulie came second, Norberg came third. And then in the final, Paulie won. He probably shouldn't have. My engine was amazing. Paulie won, I came second, and Norberg came third, and I defended him on the last couple laps. And then when we got to the scale, he was not happy. Anyways, so I came second, in my second ever X30 senior race, and then the next weekend was IAME Grands, right? IAME Grands was amazing. Put it on pole, got taken out in almost every heat race, chain popped off in 2, and then got taken out in one of them. Started the final in 18th place, and then drove 18th to 3rd in the final. And remember, this is my last ever race. I knew this. We knew this. I had to pace all weekend. Just bad luck, right? So, and then in the final, I went 18th to 3rd. Will Power was announcing that race, and Will Power decided to come up to me right after the race. We talked, exchanged numbers, and 2 weeks later, I was shipped off to Indiana for the first time to race X30 Senior at Summer Nats. So that's how I got my start into like the national scene, and then it just really progressed from there. And I took one-off deals here and there. I worked with the Will Power Kart team for 2 races. Indiana, which wasn't a good look at all. They didn't give me a good go-kart. There's really one person to blame for that, but they didn't give me a great go-kart. And then the next race at GoPro, the go-kart was new, and we had all the setups, but the kart public at the time just wasn't as developed as it is now. And we were really fast one day and then really slow the other day as soon as the weather changed, right? So it wasn't a great weekend, but it's how I got my start and how I learned to get sponsors. And then throughout the years, I just kind of weaseled my way around the paddock asking for sponsors here and there. And whenever I didn't get all the sponsorship for a race, my brother, who, remember, he's been a mechanic for the past couple of years. Now he's being a mechanic at home. So he would buy and sell dirt bikes, motorcycles, cars even. And he would work on them and then sell them really quickly, flip them like that. He was making good money by himself, right? I'm not sure how old we are now. I think we're 15 and 16, or I was 16 and he was, 20? And now he's 20 years old, or actually, we'll say 19 years old, because that's when he really started to help pay whenever we wouldn't find all the sponsorship for a race. And so he would start paying a little bit here and there. We went privateer again for a couple races. He paid everything at those races. My mom maybe paid for travel a couple times. And we would drive to the races. We drove to NOLA, drove to Utah. Whenever I was driving, he was sleeping. Didn't have my license a couple times. But I would drive and he would sleep, and then he would drive, I would sleep. And then, so we really were on our own for a little bit there. And he did amazing. I mean, one time before a race, like, we had to get the money up for it. And when I say we, I mean him. And he drove to like Virginia, drove to Florida, and drove to like, I don't know, somewhere in the middle there. And he got back home. Like, this is in like a 2-week stretch. He made like 10 grand in like 2 weeks trying to get money up. And he was just flipping everything, right? And then I hope IRS isn't listening, but he made that much money, and then he'd pay for me to race, right? And then we would go out and race, and then eventually I got the big break at the IAME Grands. But before then, at the start of the year in 2023, I don't know how much you want me to talk. I feel like I've been talking for a while. But then I joined Kart Republic in 2023 for almost like a permanent deal. After I joined KR, it was a lot more consistent. You know, every race that I would win, they would pay a bit more, so he would just pay less, right? And then I was working with the Kart Chaser boys that whole year in 2023. It was an amazing year. I had a whole bunch of fun. These guys are awesome to work with. And then IAME Grands came around, and we paid for X30. KR paid for KA, and because obviously Joe Tony won everything in 2023. So they were like, we don't need you for X30. Just keep running KA, right? And then Roman paid for X30 and was like, BBS gave us a good engine, and P1, baby, you know? And no one expected it. We wrecked in KA in the final, but in X30, we were flying. So that gave me my big break. I've luckily haven't had to pay for a go-kart race since then, you know? And then my life in general changed. I got people calling in from all over the country, trying to help pay for me to get a car seat, for me to do a go-kart race. I got to do a race at Millbridge in a 600cc micro sprint. That was amazing. I got to do a test in F4 in Arizona with the Radford Racing School. And then now I've secured sponsorship and raced 3 late model races this year, and I'm looking to get into rev racing. And if I get in there, then I'll be looking to race for their late model program and then move to ARCA. So a lot of big things have happened because of the IAME Grand Nationals. And I try to stress to a lot of people, like, I didn't grow up with money, right? My dad didn't grow up with money. My brother definitely didn't grow up with money, right? So, but my family put everything they had into me. My dad, that 14 grand he spent that weekend was his 14 grand. There was nothing left after that. He was flat broke after that. It was starting from square one. And I try to tell people, like, if you have a good foundation behind you, like you got a dad that really trusts you. I mean, my dad trusted me too much. Like, he put too much effort into it. Like, a normal dad would not spend his last $14,000 on a go-kart race. You know what I mean? But he just worked for it. So same with my brother. Like, they put everything they had in me. My brother quit his dream to support me. And now we're here. I'm looking to go to NASCAR in a couple of years, right? So it's like IAME Grands made that happen. Like Eric Jones, the people at USPKS that officiate, like, they made that happen, right? Kart Chaser, Xander. Xander is like my big brother. You know what I mean? And karting, with Kart Chaser, can change lives if you know what you're doing and you put the money in the right places.
Yeah, that's very, I guess, very powerful to hear. And I think everybody last year, whenever you cross that finish line, that entire crowd that was standing on that fence line just went absolutely ballistic, for you. And I know all of us, some of us, Alex, myself, Xander, Connor, who were all in the booth, we all had tears in our eyes kind of seeing you do that. Because I think firsthand as well. I mean, we worked together a couple of weekends, as well. And you always talked about getting back in the seat and wanting to get back out there and wanting to race. And I think that weekend we saw a friend and I guess something more than a coworker, you could say, but at that point, very big fans of yours. When we saw you cross that finish line, I think everybody in the country was for sure moved by your story. So it's I was really cool to hear from you and everything that kind of went into that, from your dad, from your brother as well, who, I mean, we saw him, how he was feeling after the race, and your dad as well, calling in after the race. I really think that's a once in a lifetime thing, and you're probably going to remember that for many, many years to come.
Yeah, never forgetting IAME Grands, never forget the race that makes you who you are. I mean, before that race, people knew me, but after that race, it was like, that's Dalton Hanes. You know what I mean? I was coaching throughout the years, but then after that, literally everything got better. Like, I had way more students coaching, people calling from all over, and then they didn't have to worry about money anymore, and it was just focused on driving.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I think the fun story to talk about is the 2023 onwards. I kind of want to go back a little bit to the 2021 race though, and kind of like you mentioned it kind of being like a turning point in a sense. Like I know we had talked about this like way back in the day, that it was kind of like your kind of last shot in a sense, and you put all the eggs in the basket of that one race. And I mean, mind you, at that point you were 16 at the time. You really had not.
In
15.
2021, maybe I just turned 15.
Yeah, you turned 15, I think. But regardless, like, young kid, right?
Mm-hmm.
And let's face it, you at the time, Ryan Norberg was 6-time national champion. Being in Mooresville, you kind of grew up around like Paulie, who had been winning like a good bit before that point, and obviously kind of had like the main like status at Mooresville. Same thing with Jarsakrak too. And, even like a Connor Zilish, right? He was in that field in 2021 as well. How difficult was it as like a 15-year-old at that point in time that only had 2 X30 races coming into that weekend? And honestly, like having some of the doubts that people were kind of casting on you, how tough was it to stay in the right mindset of, I can beat these guys, I know I can do it, and kind of keep your head focused and ultimately run through the field in the final?
Yeah, well, obviously, like it's in the back of your mind, like this could be your last karting race. There were quite a few karting races like that for me. But when you grow up at GoPro and your main competitor almost every race is Brent Cruz and Connor Zilish, you kind of know what you're going up against. Like, I knew all the drivers because I'd watched kart chasers that were coming to that race, like Braden Eves. I'd heard their names before, didn't know who they were. I was terrified, man, terrified. I thought I was going to finish 15th, like, to be honest, or worse. And then when I got to the race and I had a good engine and all the equipment was great, my brother was on top form. Things just didn't turn out that way. Like GoPro's club race is a national, or at least back then it was a national. Every race that I was doing, I was developing the skills to race against national drivers, and I was racing against national drivers. Brett Cruz, when I was in mini Swift, won the world championship, not just once, not twice, but 3 times. Okay, so I was racing against national and international drivers ever since I was young. So when I got there and everyone was fast, I was just as fast as them, if not faster. I put it on pole. It was obviously scary throughout the weekend, knowing that like we didn't have good results throughout the heat races. But in the final, I remember sitting on grid and like there's even a picture of me doing this, putting my hand on Roman's shoulder, and I just told him, I was like, we're gonna do this. Like it's like we're gonna be okay. I remember saying a prayer in the go-kart, praying to God, like, please just give me the opportunity to do something here. And then there was a big wreck at the beginning. I ended up like 12th or 13th off the wreck, and then we just shot like a rocket. When the field spread out and I didn't have to deal with Norberg blocking or whatever, this or that, I got to just pass one go-kart at a time and just keep going to that finish line and finish P3,
Yeah, absolutely. And Alex, I mean, I know you've been pretty much silent this whole segment. You have any questions for Dalton on your front?
Yeah, no, absolutely. I was just letting you guys talk because I know you and him kind of, I don't want to say grew up together, but at least you've been in the same area. So I wanted you to kind of go over the history part. But Dalton, I mean, you've been one of probably our biggest advocates for Kart Chaser. I mean, I know you worked for us for quite some time. How much, for one, do you think this kind of new age of karting has helped you in your career in terms of, finally getting the media coverage that it deserves and needs? And then the second part to this question would be, how do you see this year in comparison to the years that you were first karting on, the club scene and then into the national level in terms of this kind of pro level racing that we're trying to push out there, especially on the X30 and the shifter side?
I mean, now it's the usual, you know what I mean? I don't know how many years we are in the Kart Chaser, but it's quite a few, and everyone's used to it, I mean, all the kids that I coach, like, talk about Kart Chaser. They talk about the last race. Like, one of the littlest kids I coach, Miles Brownfield, he's a British driver, and he knows everyone at these national races. I had, before Kart Chaser, when I was in K junior, my first year, when I was 10 years old, didn't know anyone that came to town for USPKS National or WKA National. Didn't know any of their names. Now you know everything. Like, and the sponsors know that as well. Like, they can see that, right? Kart Chaser videos get views, right? And views means advertisement. Advertisement means money. That means money that can be put in the driver's pockets to race races. You know what I mean? And Kart Chaser is doing an amazing job of showing that. And like, it really makes me mad when I hear people, oh, Kart Chaser didn't have a good cover this weekend. It glitched a little bit. It's like, dude, you don't realize how lucky you were. Like, back in the day, like, we have internet problems occasionally because you don't know what we're going with behind the scenes. Like, Xander's out there working. They get there on Wednesday, sometimes Tuesday, to try and figure out the Wi-Fi situation. You know what I mean? And then for the broadcast to be put on so smoothly almost every time. Dude, I remember back in the day talking to people about SCUSA races. They were like, dude, SCUSA races were horrible. You'd get on track. There'd be no pushback bumpers. Someone could literally just kill you in one corner. No penalty, no nothing. There were no cameras. No one saw any of it. And most of the time, there were some corners on certain tracks that wouldn't have an official standing there, and that was the corner if you wanted to take someone out, you just took them out, right? You can't get away with that anymore. There's not dirty driving anymore. Like, everything has changed. Like, and people don't even realize it, especially the new dads that are coming in. Their kids are getting good in micro and mini. They don't understand, like, how incredible it is that Kart Chaser is filming this. People in Europe do, though. People in Europe that do the European club races, people in Canada, I've heard of a lot of people in Canada that are like, they're very jealous. They're almost mad that they don't have us because it's amazing. You know what I mean? It like I said before with the advertisement and stuff, like, there's so many more rides that people are getting now. Back in the day, I think there was a lot of more money being spent, like, at certain points for certain drivers. Like, I remember Top Crip USA had a couple of drivers they were paying for. But nowadays, it's way more consistent. Like, so many people can get deals. I know kids in mini that get free chassis every weekend. That's insane. Getting free chassis in mini, like, you should at least be paying till senior, most people. You know what I mean? But yeah, Kart Chaser's done an amazing job of showing everything, really.
Yeah, and I mean, again, like, you've kind of seen it. You worked with us a lot through 2022, 2023, and I kind of have to ask you, how difficult was it to watch those races, especially after you had the success in 2021 at KC's first weekend that we put on a broadcast? The next 2 years, you raced here and there. You raced a good part of the early part of the 2022 national season. Obviously, you were in the seat a good bit in the Club Series in 2023 and then ran a couple of the KA races. But on the side, when you were down in Miami watching Joe Turney against Ryan Norberg, when you were in Vegas and whatever, watching all of these big superstars duke it out, how difficult was it for you to kind of see that from behind a camera or behind the mic or even directing? And how much did it make you hungrier to kind of get back on track and get back towards kind of getting that seat time, getting that success?
Yeah, I mean, like you said, watching Joe Turney and Ryan Norberg duke it out, thank goodness the cameras don't have mics on them. Didn't have them back then. They do now. The cameramen have mics now on their cameras. They got a little mic there. Thank goodness they didn't then, because I was screaming when Joe Turney was duking it out with Ryan Norberg, because I'd been behind him multiple races. I mean, he had allegations of cheating, right? No one can say if he cheated or not. He's never been caught, but he has an amazing engine either way. And Norberg won it all the time. He won all the races. You know what I mean? IAME Grand's that first year was the only race that I could say I had an engine that was good enough to beat Ryan. I was just too young. Like, my engine might have been better. Like, that engine was amazing, right? PBS all the way. But anyways, so yeah, it was very hard to be behind the camera. I love racing, so even if I'm not racing, I have a really good appreciation for it. Like, I was coaching back in Cincinnati, and I was rooting on Brandon Carr. Like, he was doing amazing. But yeah, I mean, obviously it was hard to watch, but it lit a fire in me, really, to get back on track and be able to duke it out with the best again. You know what I mean? And also, watching those races taught me a lot about racecraft and a lot about the rhythm of the races, and it made me a better coach and a better driver.
That's awesome. And I mean, back when you worked with us, I mean, we saw in Miami, you kind of detailed this earlier when you got the first ride with Kart Republic in 2023. It was around, I believe, March of that year, where initially the deal was just a simple club race, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
And you go out there, it takes you, I believe, 2 races to win, but ultimately, like, that was enough at that point to where Eric started kind of working with you. And correct me if I'm wrong on this, but I think like that year was the first time, even if you look back at like 2022, 2021, where you really went more than, I guess, like 4 or 5 months running with the same people kind of supporting you back. How much of that stability at that point, kind of knowing that you had someone like Eric behind you, having the Kart Sport guys or whoever you were working with on the Kart Republic side trusting you, how did that help you kind of have a good mindset throughout the rest of 2023?
Yeah, so like you said, I mean, I grew up on Top Kart, and then I moved to OTK. But my brother, when he would buy and sell karts, whenever I would do club races, he would want me to do them occasionally. I drove club races on a Praga comp kart. Never drove a Borel, but I drove quite a lot of go-karts, right? And then when I got to nationals, I had to drive multiple different go-karts. I had to get like 1 or 2 races. I hadn't fully proven myself. That IAME Grand performance was enough to get me my foot in the door and enough to get me sponsored, and a couple people sponsored me here and there, right? And then a couple teams giving me deals like free tent space, maybe get tires. But ultimately, until that big win in IAME Grands, it was never a conversation of, oh, we're paying everything, like, here's your flight information. It was always, here's deals, here's that, this and that, right? So I had to just go whatever race, whatever team gave me the better deal for that weekend was the deal we took, because we couldn't afford to not. Like, there was no loyalty because there couldn't be loyalty. I mean, Bennick helped out with 10 space one time, and then REM helped out with 10 space one time for Vegas. Could have gone with Bennick for Vegas, but didn't because we got better options with a different team, right? So it's like you never really had that stability until KR. And then, like you said, yes, absolutely. Being on a chassis for the entire year on one singular chassis and developing with that chassis and learning racecraft and tire pressures and really everything, it helped extremely. And then finally being able to get my chance with X30 and racing against Joe. Racing against Joe changed my whole perspective on karting as a whole. And working with him a couple weekends later and Summer Nats changed everything for me. The way I drove, the way I learned how to drive, the way I went through the process of a weekend, that whole writing down pressures thing that I do every weekend now, and writing down all the setup changes we make throughout the weekend so I can always go back and say how that felt, writing down notes around what felt like what, that came from Joe. that's because Joe did that. He knew what to do, right? So being on a go-kart that whole year, the KR, was amazing. It was awesome. I loved the support from the KR boys. They were all awesome under that tent. Nothing bad to say about those guys. Just the next year, Eric couldn't afford to help out as much, and it was back to the thing where it was like, Eric is an amazing guy, and nothing bad to say about him. He is doing what he needs to do. He's got all these kids coming in for KR, and they're doing great. But he helped out so many people in his career, including me. And at some point, you just got to call it quits on paying for all these drivers. You know what I mean? Like, at some point, you're spending too much money, and you need to realize, hey, if a team owner, I don't think a lot of team owners know this, but if you were to pay for one driver and he were to win every single race that year and get every single prize, you would still not be making profit in go-karting. It costs more than it is to win. So eventually he just couldn't like pay everything. You know what I mean? He still was willing to help me out, but Sodi offered me an entire deal, fully sponsored, fully factory Sodi driver. And I was already looking to get into cars that year when they approached me, but fortunately there was time to race with Sodi, and I still wanted seat time in a go-kart. People don't realize how extremely important it is to have seat time in a go-kart before, like, as you're still doing cars. Karting is the basics. It's what you know. And if I wasn't with Sodi, I would have to take my sponsorship money from cars and put it in the go-karts to race with KR. And a lot of people didn't understand that when I left KR. And it was just like, I would have had to take money away from car racing and put it into go-kart racing if I was racing with KR. That's never going to happen. You have to focus on cars at some point. At some point, you have to miss races. You know what I mean? I had to miss Rotax Grand Nationals last year because it cost so much money to go to Bahrain to do an F4 test in Arizona, which was much, much cheaper, right? And I couldn't even afford to go to Bahrain. You know what I mean? That's 3 people. My mom was going to go. She's like, I'm not letting you go to Bahrain with just you and your brother. What? No. So a lot of people don't understand that. You know what I mean? It's a give and take, you know, and I love the KR boys, but had to go to Sodi to get seat time, you know, and I think it worked out quite well.
Yeah, no, for sure. And I mean, Dalton, you made a good point about, I guess, giving time for yourself to kind of learn a new chassis. And that also kind of came into play this year as well, whenever you start off with the Sodi boys. But I mean, it doesn't only give you time to learn a new chassis, but also Roman. You know, he's the guy that's kind of working on it, and he has to learn setup, how to, you know, turn a wrench. And, you know, a set screw could be different on the Sodi than on the KR. So I guess all that being said, I know you probably haven't said too much about this year. But you are running, so I guess I'll give you the floor to kind of announce the chassis that you're running and the team that you're running with.
Yeah, so this weekend's interesting, right? So I didn't plan to even race any more races this year. I plan to just be a full-time driver coach and then a full-time driver for AK Performance and late models. But I got the opportunity to drive for Sodi at the beginning of the year. Took that. Sodi boys were great. Loved the chassis, right? Like I said, I grew up on a lot of different chassis, so getting to the Sodi wasn't too hard to adapt. But then the Sodi boys couldn't afford it anymore. Like I said, they weren't paying for one driver and losing profit. They were paying for 2, right? And then they were giving deals to even more people. So they just couldn't afford it anymore. So I had to leave the Sodi boys, and then I decided, hey, I'll just go back to what I said I'd do at the beginning of the year, full-time coaching. Got a job working for Grayson Dean Walcott and worked for him for one race with Parolin. Love those guys. And then SLA hit me up for the next race for Indiana, I believe. Worked for them in Indiana. Then I worked for them in Cincinnati, that race I was talking about. And then as we were talking at Cincinnati, they were like, hey, we want you to actually drive for us. Like, what do you think about driving Supernats? And I was like, I don't like Supernats. I'd rather do IAME Grands, right? A lot more chance of winning. And then Supernats, I mean, you qualify pole, you can still get taken out in any of the heat races. So I said, I'd rather do IAME Grands. And they were like, all right, so we'll help you with IAME Grands X30. And I was like, yeah, I'd love to do that. They were like, what chassis you want to be on? I mean, you see the shirt, OTK, Kart Republic, Parolin. So it was really just my choice, what chassis I'd like to be on. And I decided to go with the Sodi. I really enjoyed the Sodi kart. I'll be on a used chassis. I think it's 3 races old. I know the Sodi. Like I said, the KR was amazing last year, but I know they updated the chassis. and I couldn't get a chassis that was an older version that I know. So like you guys talked about, it's important to be on a chassis that you know what you're going to do. My brother and I know, we did USPKS GoPro, the very last race on it, and I know exactly what setups I'm going to be using this weekend. I know exactly what tire pressure I'm going to be using this weekend. So it was just what I knew at the time. So I'm going to go with the Sodi for X30. And then after last weekend, at the very end of the weekend, me and Craig Feiner were talking. We were like, hey, man, like, you're not racing KA? And I was like, yeah, you're right, I'm not racing KA. And he was like, well, you're on this chassis. If you don't bin it, do you want to run this chassis for KA? And I was like, yeah, no, I'd love to. Worked out a deal with some sponsors to be able to pay for KA. I mean, it's GoPro, you know, I can call up some people and I can find a ride. So, yeah, I'll be running KA 100 in the TB cart. The J&M boys actually were able to, I had to run around the track at Rotax and find out who was going back to GoPro. Almost every team wasn't. And then they're taking the go-kart, the TB cart for me. So I'll be on TB for KA and Sodi for X30, and we'll see how it goes.
Wow, that's I guess Roman mentioned something about a Sodi, but I had no idea about the K. So that's super interesting. 2 chassis, 1 weekend. That's I don't think we've seen that inside the pro classes in quite some time. 2 different chassis. So
yeah, it'll be fine. I know
no,
the TB.
I've done it before.
We're not doubting you, dude.
Exactly.
We're not doubting you. You'll be all right.
Yeah, I think I might have been the last one to do it, which was what
Yeah,
everybody was
2022 at USPKS, you did it. You did top card and OTK.
Yeah, love that top cart. That was the last time I got to drive it, but that top cart was killed, so couldn't do it anymore. But yeah, it'll be a good weekend.
Yeah, and I mean, again, it's kind of a unique situation. You have 2 classes, 2 track layouts, at least not counting the shootout stuff. We were talking earlier in the podcast, the most track time you get at any event. I mean, last year, you know, you kind of had a unique situation where you were racing both classes. It became clear, I think, in the pre-final on Sunday, there would be an uphill battle in KA because of the engine issue you had. How difficult is it to kind of manage that many races, that much kind of mental stimulus going on when you have kind of 2 classes you're focusing on? Because I know, like, it's one of those things that, like, you see people run 2 classes, at least like prior to this year, a lot on the national scene. But this race and Supernats as well, both of them kind of have a unique format where you have a lot of track time, a lot of different sort of like things being thrown at you. I mean, how difficult is it to manage that? And actually, do you think that the two different engine packages help you out when it comes to kind of adapting to the track changes?
Yeah, so like I said, write notes. Throughout the whole weekend, last weekend at Rotax, I was completely level-headed. Like did not have the pace. 5/10 off of Hodgson almost every single heat race, like 4 to 5 tenths off. Didn't matter to me. I was writing down my notes. I knew if the engine was there at the end of the weekend, I would be there, and that's exactly what happened. So just keeping a level head, breathing a lot throughout the weekend. I'll actually be coaching as well. So whenever I get off track, I'll write down my notes, tell Roman what he needs to change, and then I will go and do video and data with the minis and micros, probably Marcelo, Maxwell, Marcelo Forrest, and micro Maxwell Macha, and a couple other minis. I'm not sure if Benja is going to do it. I know Simon Klein's going to be there. So I'll be coaching a little bit there as well. Edgar, I think Rodriguez and Case Jr. So for me, it's not too much of a challenge. A year ago, I did USPKS and did all 3 classes, X30, Shifter, and KA. That was a challenge, but I've gotten a lot older, a lot more matured the last year. And yeah, so it's really just a matter of keeping a level head. You know what I mean? Just staying calm, writing down your notes, sticking to the basics, knowing that you're going to be there at the end of the weekend. If I'm not fast in the heats in X30, if something goes wrong, I won't be worried at all. You might see me mad for a couple minutes. Don't look. You might see Roman throwing a wrench. I'll duck. Don't worry.
Cameras are everywhere.
Yeah. So as long as I duck and I see him throwing it, I'll be fine. You know. So yeah, it'll be a good weekend as long as I can keep a level head, which happens every weekend. You know, recently, like you said, we've been getting more trophies. You know, the more calm I seem to stay throughout the weekend, the better the weekend goes. And then if it doesn't go the right way, it doesn't go the right way. That's karting sometimes, and you just got to hold your head up high and say, yeah, I mean, didn't go our way, but whatever. That's racing. You know, I hear that saying a lot. That's racing. You know, so it'll be a good weekend though. And the thing I love about IAME Grands is even if you don't have the best weekend, like yourself, it's amazing to watch. Like, it's an amazing race. Like, I try to tell like a couple series owners this. If you can get a family, or even most of the team owners, if you can get a family to have a horrible weekend on track, right? The kid, for some reason, he's a micro kid. He's early. He just had a horrible weekend though. He's not a good driver yet. If you can get him to have a last place day or a last place weekend, and he's still smiling when the day's over. Maybe he's mad for an hour, but he's still smiling when the day's over because he gets to watch a shootout. You know what I mean? Like Ryan Norberg, Paulie Massimino, me, like all the big names. Like sometimes Connor Zillish when he comes into town. Brent Cruz was there last year. You know what I mean? When he gets to watch us try and kill each other for $5,000, he's still gonna have a smile on his face. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that's what IAME Grands does, and sometimes what Supernats does. It's just a good vibe. I bet you guys can attest to that as well. Like, you're just happy all weekend. You know what I mean? Last year was miserable with the heat, but we all had fun. I mean, I think that we're not allowed to do the tuner race anymore, like the mechanics race. That first year, the mechanics just destroyed
Too
the
much.
go-kart. Like, the mechanics were killing each other. But look at what you guys just did. You guys all just smiled, cheesing, hearing it, just the mention of that tuner race. It was an amazing
So
weekend.
good.
I'm like, everyone had a good time, right? So, and that's what IAME Grands does, and that's why I like it so much. You know what I mean? Even if I don't have a good weekend this weekend, you're still gonna probably see me smiling at the end of the weekend. You know?
Yeah, well, I think it's funny you mentioned that tuner race. Actually, I'm probably gonna go back and watch that. It was one of the funniest things I've ever seen in my entire life. But you mentioned you're a driver who does a lot of double duty, sometimes triple duty. I'd say you have a bit of a different workout regimen compared to what we see from normal race car drivers.
Yeah.
I mean, just talk to us about it a little bit because we see it on your social medias, kind of what you do off the track to kind of stay in shape. What is it that you exactly do?
Yeah, so like you have the racing side of things, right? Where I've learned a lot, like progressed a lot, and then you have off track. A lot of people don't do that, you know. Like a lot of people just go home, they chill, they play golf, whatever. I'm not a golfer. Okay, so I would get home, and I would always want to find a way to get better at racing when I was really young. But the first thing I did was I watched a lot of the British Kart Championship, and then it was like, how do I get better off track? Like, because I couldn't have practice days. We didn't pay for practice. I would just show up and race the club races, right? So I was like, how do I get better off track? And my dad was like, working out. So ever since I was young, my dad had me doing like 200 push-ups and sit-ups a day, eating a lot of bananas. Yeah, that's what he knew was good. He was a bodybuilder growing up, so I would always work out. But as I got a bit older and my dad was on the road more, and I was just at my house alone. Especially when I got homeschooled to do national karting. After that first weekend at IAME Grands, a couple of weeks later, I got homeschooled because so much out of school, you know what I mean? So I got homeschooled, and then we couldn't afford a gym membership, so I decided to have a home gym, and we didn't have many weights. So I looked up a couple things on YouTube, found this guy named Chris Harria on YouTube, and started watching videos on calisthenics, something I'd never heard of before. And it was basically just a lot of push-ups, a lot of core-based workouts, and then I started getting into it, and then I heard about like a lot of the pull-up variations and push-up variations. And then once you got really good at push-ups, you were able to do things like push-ups into handstands, and then it's called a planche push-up, where you're doing a push-up, but your feet are all hovering off the ground. You're still in push-up position, your feet are just off the ground, and you do a push-up down and up with your feet off the ground. And I got good at it, and I always wanted to do gymnastics growing up, but I never got the chance. And it's kind of like that. It's really core based, right? And so you have to have a solid stomach. Racing is core based. When you're in a go-kart, your core and your shoulders and even your traps, like when you go through corners, I don't have to wear a rib protector. A lot of people are like, what? You don't wear a rib protector? Brandon Carr, I think he separated like the cartilage in his ribs recently. Just so you guys know, he might not race IAME Grands. He couldn't race Rotax last weekend. He was extremely hurt with his ribs. That might be a new story for you guys. He's going to try to do double duty with hurt ribs. But karting is very, very physical. A lot of people don't understand that, especially my friends at home, when they're like, how are you doing that calisthenics stuff and you're still tired after the race? It's like, it's physical. So even your traps, like everything, you want to work out as much as you can, but you don't want to get buff, right? So got to stay thin, right? So that was the best way to do it, was to stay thin, eat healthy, you know. And not work out with too many weights. I only do curls, but a lot of times what I'm doing at home is planche push-ups, like I said before, handstand push-ups, and a lot of pull-ups, right? So yeah, that's my workout routine.
Absolutely. I mean, that's, I think it's been at this point almost 3 years worth of calisthenic content. The, I think some of us have roasted you in the past on the
Yeah,
TikToks, but I don't
they
know,
were
as all,
cringy. They were cringy at the beginning, dude.
yeah,
They were
you know,
cringy.
I mean, look, I'm not gonna say don't post the TikToks, but I do think, I mean, it's been very useful for you. And I mean, like you mentioned, to be able to do what you did last year with 3 classes in one weekend, the shifter, the X30, and the K, finishing on the podium in all 3 took a lot of talent, but also a lot of endurance as well. And I think that's something that, a lot of people that are coming from outside the sport of karting, or even haven't even really driven all 3 classes and understand kind of the differences in the physicality of shifter and X30 to a lesser degree, will understand how much of an accomplishment that is. But on my end, I have one more question. I'll let the boys finish off. Kind of more lighthearted one. I mean, at this point, you've been around the track 8 years. Pretty much every layout, every variation, done a million laps. There's 2 shootout races this weekend. Neither of them have a layout that's been announced yet. I have my own thoughts I'm going to give in the last segment, but if you were to draw up a layout for the K shootout and a layout for the X30 shootout, what would it be and why?
All right, so let me think about the GoPro layouts, right? Definitely, turn 1's got to be turn 11 backwards, right? You got to start out backwards. Honestly, best layout, I've thought about it a lot. Do the whole track backwards, completely, just the whole track, normal national layout backwards. You do turn 1 would be the turn 11, and then you'd have quite a little straightaway into the double rights, which would now be the double lefts. Perfect passing zone, right? It's a deep braking zone, and then you do the double lefts, and then you do the hairpin backwards. Perfect open passing zone because it's an exit, and then it gets tight. So you have a big entry, long late lunges, like I think Zilish did on Norberg one year. Big, long late lunge, right? And then you do the right, like probably like a flat out turn 7. And then I don't know if they put the barriers on the curbs for turn 6 or if they let us use curb turn 6. And then you do turn 6 backwards, right, up the hill, chicane up the hill. That chicane up the hill would be insane. And then you got the bowl backwards. We already know that's a good layout. You got turn 3 backwards. We already know that's good. And then you just do a long, I guess it would be like a long left turn 1, which wouldn't be a great ending, but throughout the rest of the lap, I mean, it'd be a cool lap.
That's all on my end. Caleb, I know you have one more. Have at it.
Yeah, last one here for me. Dalton, I know a couple of weeks ago you took part in the Ryan Perry Motorsports camp, coached up a lot of kids, and recently one of your boys just got a win this past week. And yeah, so
Yes,
Nate Dogg just got that win. And I guess lastly here for me, I mean, what is it? How does that kind of feel? Watching a driver like that develop, and you have drivers I think that you've helped out, all over the country. I think Simon Jack Klein was there too, a driver that you've helped as well there. So what was that kind of like for you, just watching that on from home?
Dude, I love karting and I love driving specifically. There is no better feeling than watching a kid that you coach win a race and seeing the fire in their eyes and seeing their eyes light up when they've won their first race. Unfortunately, I wasn't there when Nathan won, but I'm sure the kid and the crowd was going crazy, right?
Yeah.
Not only did Nathan win from the Ryan Perry Motorsports camp, Shay, I forgot his last name, but Shay won at the K1 circuit. He won at the K1 circuit. He was at that camp too. I'd never met Shay and I'd never met Nathan. And they developed really well throughout that camp. I mean, I wish we did more camps like that. Ryan Perry's going to do a couple more. Come to the camp if you want to. You don't have to be under the Ryan Perry Motorsports banner if you're not. There were a couple drivers that aren't, but they came and did the camp anyways. It was a great time. And yeah, like you said, like Marcelo Flores, he came second at USPKS Cincinnati, I think it was.
Mm-hmm.
He did he was pissed after the race. He came second to Zane, but he did exactly what I told him. I said,
yeah,
you get to second, you look back. If there's a gap, push till 2 to go and then try to pass, or push till 3 to go, really, and then try to pass. He's going up against Zane Burgess, all right? I coach Zane as well. I mean, he's an amazing kid. Obviously, he didn't get the win. Marcelo didn't get the win on him, but he did an amazing job. About an hour, it took about 35, 40 minutes to take his helmet off, but once he got his helmet off, his dad gave him a hug. he realized I just came second. You was PKS. You know what I mean? Like I think he got a podium before, but he never came second. That's his best ever finish at a national. He started dancing with his dad. He threw water on his dad, and like I could not have been happier in that moment. Like that's better than a race win sometimes. You know what I mean? Like obviously you want to run races for yourself, but I love watching the kiddos win, dude. It's the best feeling ever.
Yeah, no, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's all for us on the question for Alex, unless you have any more. I think,
No, I'm all good, boys.
yeah, I think on my end, about all on the questions, Dalton. I mean, I know you're going back for back-to-back this year. I think if you win absolutely everything in both classes, somehow, some way, that would be roughly $19,000 worth of payout. So,
Unless you
yeah,
guys donate. They donated one year. Y'all
yeah,
y'all
very
start
first
donating
year.
if you see me. If you see me qualify for both shootouts, start hitting that donate button, all right?
Yeah,
Give me some more money. Could
don't
always use some
put-
more money for late models.
yeah, don't vote this dude into the fan vote though. I might need it more than he does. So if you're
Yeah,
watching
yeah,
this
I don't need it.
podcast, yeah, if you're watching this podcast, don't vote for Dalton Hanes on the fan vote. But if you're
I
looking for an
won't need
actual,
it.
if you're looking for an actual race winner, he's a pretty good shout. So, Dalton, floor is yours. I know we already talked about your plans for this weekend. If there's anyone else you'd like to thank before we sign off and head out to our final quick segments.
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to say thank you to SLA. You know what I mean? These guys are going to help me with this weekend. And I'd love to say thank you to Craig Feiner and Chris Black and Shane Tripley, I think, at Speed Tech Racing. I forgot his last name. Sorry, man. But I had a great time at Rotax, and hopefully we can have a great time with SLA this weekend. Sebastian and his son Santi, they did. I had an amazing time working for them as a coach. And again, I'll be coaching my kiddos as well, and I'm super excited to get after it on a Thursday morning.
Well, Dalton, we appreciate having you on, and we appreciate you taking the time out of your, I guess, afternoon to come and spend some time with us. So again, we appreciate having you. And then when we come back from this quick commercial break, more to come from KC Grid Talk.
Brandon, why are there all these charges for just over $200 from Acceleration Kart Racing's website? That's because AKR gives you free shipping on orders of $200 or more within the continental U.S. Okay, but I thought you were just getting a pair of gloves. That's what, $70? But if I'm getting a new pair of gloves, I might as well get a new pair of shoes to match. And then on top of that, I'll get a neck brace because with the shipping, it's basically free. Yeah, I do not think the math checks out on that.
Everything you need, all in one place and shipped to your door for free for orders of $200 or more. Exclusions apply. Spend responsibly. Shop AKR.com.
All right, welcome back to KC Grid Talk, episode number 24. We just wrapped up an interview with last year's IAME Grand National winner in Dalton Hanes. Like you mentioned, racing both classes this week in KA Senior with the Race Lab TV cart folks, as well as the SLA boys is helping them out, and then also running the X30 division on the Sodi cart. He's also driver coaching, doing a lot of things, and will be certainly a threat to double up on his race win from 2023. But we get to the last segment of the show, boys. We're talking about the IAME Grand Nationals getting set to go for another year. We just got the entry list before this episode started. I don't know if you guys had a chance to look at it. Caleb, Alex, either of you?
Negative.
A little bit.
Yeah, see, every time I go to my phone, my camera tweaks out. So I'm not going to do that. I'm just going straight off my head. There's 19 entered in X30. There's 38 entered in K Senior. 171, I believe, was the entry count the last I checked. So we get into the X30 guys, and we have a bit of a lower turnout than last year, but still a lot of fast guys. No Austin Garrison, unfortunately, but we do have Dalton back. We have Frankie Mossman taking Garrison's place with Speed Concepts Racing. When you've looked through the X30 field, what do you think the main storyline is in terms of the field composition, Alex?
Yeah, I mean, this is, it's an interesting field to me. 19, it's a similar number to what we've seen throughout the year, but I'd say there's some new names, right? I think that the likes of Frankie Mossman and X30 Pro is going to be pretty intriguing to me. Just, kind of wrapped up the season for his USF Pro campaign. So to be replacing, the Garrison for this weekend, that'll be a pretty cool one. Jacob Kolar, a name that we haven't seen too often here on the national scene, besides when we go down to Homestead for the SCUSA Winter Series. He's been doing a lot of testing down in Homestead. Then we have obviously Pauly Massimino, Cameron Weinberg, Aiden Levy as well. Another Trackhouse sort of guy, Hayden Jones as well, Dalton Hanes. There's a lot of Trackhouse locals, and then the return of Justin Ataconis. This is kind of his one race of the year that he always tends to do and do pretty well. So I'm excited to see what Justin can do. For a guy who is not in the seat at all, doesn't really test, doesn't have the time to, obviously going up to college. So I'm excited to see what Justin can do. And I know I don't want to ramble on the entire list, but I think it is a pretty intriguing list that we have. We have some kind of newcomers from the junior side as well. We have Mateo Pappas, Nix Eggleston. We saw Carter McMurray do his X30 Pro debut at MCC. He's back at a track that he knows very well. So I think there's a lot of intriguing, aspects to this entry list. There's not the many big names that we see, but there are some the Trackhouse locals combined with the pro guys, which consists of it's less than 20. Hopefully by the time we get to the event, maybe we'll hit 20 or so for X30 Pro. But it's a pretty intriguing list, and I think we're gonna be able to put on a pretty good show this weekend for X30.
Yeah, and I mean, one quick thing before I turn it over to Caleb on his thoughts I thought was really interesting is Cameron Weinberg. You mentioned him a little bit, but this is his first time running X30, I believe, in quite some time on the national scene. The last time we saw him at a national race at Trackhouse running X30 was in 2022, where he ran runner-up to Ryan Norberg, back when Norberg had the streak of 7 consecutive main event victories. So, Weinberg now with Chad Duncan Racing on a Kart Republic will be very intriguing to watch for sure. And Caleb, I mean, looking through the rest of the entry list, again, not sure how much you've been able to see of it, but, KA, a little bit of a weaker field. There's only, I believe, 39 in terms of the total entries, but you look down the list and there is a lot of guys who are going to be quick. I mean, Mossman's running double duty, Weinberg's running double duty, Pauly's running double duty, Hayden Jones running both, Mateo Pappas, Dalton, like we mentioned on the podcast. Kai Hunter is actually only lined up to run in KA. So we mentioned this back in Cincinnati for SCUSA that it was kind of Kai was planning to run IAME Grands in KA, but I did not realize he was just doing the one class. And then you go down. Obviously, you have the same guys that have been up front all year on the KA side of things as well with Overbeck, Finn Bailiff, AJ Myers. Whenever he runs KA, he's registered as well. But I mean, the last few years, it seems like KA is kind of in the most stacked field just because of the sheer amount of double duty drivers here. And I mean, when you look at that list, you look at the guys that are doing double, who stands out to you as kind of having the best chance to winning both races?
Yeah, I mean, you can really never count out Dalton whenever he gets down to it. I mean, that kid is going to be quick in both classes. So, I really think after what he did last year, comes into this weekend as being one of the favorites. But when you talk about that KA senior field, I mean, if you look at it with the numbers and I guess with the star power in those classes, I really think the KA senior main event and the KA senior shootout is probably going to be that. If you ask me, that's what all eyes are going to be on this weekend. With only 19 or about 20 in X30, I think KA this year has definitely become that marquee class that a lot of people, whenever they go onto the racetrack, everybody's at the fence line. Everybody's definitely watching. So fate of the universe on the line. Give me Emery Lida in K100 senior at his home track. No, but all jokes aside, if I were to choose an actual driver, no.
Whoa.
I'll joke. But yeah, I mean, I'm excited to see what you can do. You've had an up and down year. But again, I really think Dalton is going to be the favorite this weekend in both classes to take the fight. I mean, he was super quick at Trackhouse Motorplex whenever he went there for USPKS, and he was fighting with Ryan. So I'm excited to see what Dalton can do in X30, and yeah, we'll see what he can do in KA as well. So I really think for me, he's one of the ones doing double duty. If not Frankie as well, who makes his return this weekend. So I think Frankie's going to be quite strong as well with the Speed Concepts boys.
Yeah, some other interesting names that I think are going to be up at the front that I didn't mention all the way through. You've got Adam Brickley coming back, course, 2 years ago, he had a really good run through the pre-final in this race. He's been up at the front pretty much any time the national race comes to North Carolina, whether it be at Charlotte or at Trackhouse. Aiden Levy running double duty this weekend, a new team this weekend, a new kart this weekend. That will be interesting to watch. We'll have more on that in the next couple of days. Parker DeLong makes his return to the seat. The last time we saw him at a kart race, we just lost Alex. I think he's decided to sign off early for the night. Gotta go make dinner, I guess. No, he's back now. But Parker DeLong, last time we saw him was at Rock Vegas last year. He's good. So, I mean, you go through the list, and there's really, I guess the midfield maybe isn't quite there as much as we've seen in times past. Only 38, 39 entries total. But, I mean, the star power in K is pretty crazy. And as I bring Alex back in, as he made a quick hiatus, laptop must have died,
Yeah, I need a new computer.
Wait.
This is bad. It just I was watching the battery like trickle down the whole time while it's plugged in. So I was preemptive and I got on my phone instead.
Okay, let's do some quick troubleshooting real quick. Do you have other apps open on your laptop by chance?
No,
We're
I do
not
not.
using we're not using
I closed everything but Chrome to open StreamYard.
no tabs, no anything. You're just straight up just
No,
destroying the
it's
battery.
it's an issue I've
What-
had for a while. So this is a computer issue.
What type of laptop is it?
MacBook M1.
It should not be doing that. That's I avoid streaming on my laptop or on my MacBook, and I feel vindicated for that. But anyways, that's besides the point. We don't want to spend too much time on Alex's very old technology habits. This weekend, the fourth year of IAME Grands, Dalton put it really well when he said that, you can have a bad weekend and still come out of this race having a lot of fun. I can attest to this personally because last year when Dalton won last season, made my weekend, honestly. I was rolling around P26 in the final. We felt horrible after that one. And yet that was still one of the most fun weekends last year. But when you look at this event as a whole and you look at kind of the Norberg Invitational, and some of the other one-offs that happen. Obviously, I mean, Supernats doesn't really count because it's sort of the bookend on the year. But do you think that all-star races like this and one-off races are good for the growth of the sport? And kind of like, how do you assess IAME Grands heading into its fourth season of existing? And I'll leave the floor open to both of you guys on this one.
I'll let Alex go first.
Yeah, I think it's good for the sport. Absolutely. We've hinted at things like this in the past. We've talked about how we have like the big three right now in terms of the national calendar, and you could argue that we can make it one big national series of 10 races if you wanted to, because they're all at the top of their level in terms of national level racing. Then you have a regional, you have your club stuff, but having an all-star level race, a race, I don't want to say Supernats-esque, because Supernats, I mean, you go talk to drivers in Europe and they say that, listen, Supernats and the World Championships are, cut from the same cloth, right? In terms of they're 1A and 1B for the level of which the driving and, the prestige that it is to go out there and win that race. But IAME Grands is up there, I'd say, for number 2, obviously, in the country for things that you want to win on a one-off. But having those one-off events for drivers to not feel pressured into racing, right? Because if you go to a USBKS, a SCUSA, a Stars event, any sort of club race, and you want to do a one-off or maybe 2 races in the season, there really isn't much of a point to do it mid-season, because you're only doing it to go out there and get either a lap time, seat time, or to go out there and win for yourself, but you're not in it for the points. But when you have races like Supernats, like IAME Grands, like the Norberg Invitational, with a lot of money on the line and a lot of prestige on the line, all of a sudden you bring in drivers who maybe are coming in from the regional side that want to dip their toes in a high level race but don't want to do a whole championship. Or you have the guys that are doing a whole championship that say, what, I want to go out there and win some money, try to win some money, and get my name out there, like we heard Dalton mention, right? And I don't want to pat ourselves in the back here, but Dalton has been a huge advocate for us, and he has openly said that, listen, without the IAME Grands, without these big ticket events that he's gone out there and been very successful at and won at, it's a different story in terms of where he's at in his racing career. So I think having these prestigious events and these all-star level races, like we call them, absolutely, it is pivotal, I'd say, for the sport to have and to continue to have more of them. I was very, I loved the Norberg Invitational, and I hope and I'm sure that Ryan will continue to improve on that and make it better for the next year and the years to come, because that race was awesome and it kind of kicked off the sort of pro style racing, even those in the KA stuff, but it still kicked off that, you know, all-star feel of we're going to put a lot of money on the line here and we're going to go out there and make it a one-off race. Anybody's invited. And I think that is huge for karting.
Absolutely. Caleb?
I personally could care less about the prestige about the race. I mean, if I were to race IAME Grand Nationals, I'd do it for the money. There's 10 grand that I can win on a given weekend. I'm racing for the money. This is the biggest, I think, money race that you have. It probably in the U.S. and in North America at the moment, outside of the Super Nationals in Shifter. If it was up to me, I would. If I had to pick one race to do throughout the year, I pick this one, and I think that shows a lot why Dalton did it last year. In X30 to try and win the money, to try and get in there to fund an X race, to fund something else. And again, you are putting in a lot of money to come out here and race this weekend if you have to travel and whatnot. But there's a lot going into this weekend. If I'm not mistaken, Emery, there's a junior shootout as well this year in KA Junior.
It's the same format as last year. So all the support categories are going to have their own like mini 5-person shootout, I think. And then the two main ones are K, which is $4,000 to win CP performance engineering, and then obviously the X30 shootout, which is $5,000 to win.
Yeah.
So
no, like that, exactly that. For the young classes to go out there and maybe get some money as well. Like I think that's super cool. And again, like there also has to be a balance with it, right? Because what we saw at the Norberg Invitational, it was cool to see 10 grand up on the line, but the racecraft was atrocious. The racecraft was terrible. To see guys killing each other for a race win, that's not what you want to see. And that's also kind of what we saw in the couple of shootouts at the start of the year. At the start of the IAME Grand Nationals early on in 2021, where everybody was crashing left and right, trying to fight for the money. So I think if, we can do this with the level of respect, who cares about the prestige, go out there and give these guys the money, and then the prestige will come. Then everybody's going to want to do it, because they're not doing anything like this in Europe. If you ask those guys how much they win for winning WSK, they get nothing for winning a world championship. They get no money for winning maybe the most prestigious race in the world whenever you race against 13, 14-year-old drivers in OK and or Shifter. I give the prestige to Shifter overseas, but OK, you don't get money over there. You don't get money for WSK. You don't get money for the World Championships. You get money for the IAME Grand Nationals. And that's why I rank, what we have over here to a high level, because there's pro guys that going at it. There's 20-year-olds who this is their life. They're going to go at it because this is what's going to help them pay the bills next week. And I think that's better than whatever prestige you want to talk about.
Yeah. See, I will say the one thing on that, and look, I think in Dalton's case and in a few other people's case that you'll see up towards the front of the X30 and KA fields, they're gonna get the money themselves. That's how it goes. A guy like Norberg, a guy that's on a factory team that has a paid ride, so to speak, they aren't. I would kind of push back and say, they're not doing it for the money, because in that case, they're not going to get to keep all that money. It's probably different at Supernats, but with IAME Grands, at least, like a lot of the money that you end up winning will go back to the team. And
matter of fact, hold on. Like before you proceed, I want you to go back before you proceed. And if we can get Ryan on next week, or if we can ask him during the weekend, I want you to go back and ask him on how he felt losing all that money to Joe Turney last year. And, it probably didn't affect them all too much, but it definitely felt like crap not putting that extra, $5 grand or 10 grand if you were to win in your pocket, So before I guess you go on and compare it to like maybe the factory guys, it doesn't mean anything to them.
Like, well, no, it definitely means something to them. I don't want to say otherwise.
No. Yeah, but again, like that's extra money that these guys can put in their pockets and like enjoy having, if you understand what I'm saying.
So like, okay, so we have, I mean, if that's the case, then why do we not see more entries in X30, right?
So that was my point that I was going to get at. If you look at the entry list and count the number of like pro guys that are in it compared to, I'd say like the more club, there's a lot of guys who do the Trackhouse Club race. There's a lot of juniors making like their maiden or couple of maybe their second or third start in senior, and then a couple of guys that we see on the regional level or even like the national level, but are more mid pack that are in this entry list right now. So I think that's where I'm all for 100%. I think more races should have money on the line. There's a fine line, right? Because then it does take away from the meaning of other races when every race is the same. But 100%, I agree with you. There should be money on the line for all races. But I think you missed my point a little bit on the prestige. I am not taking away from the fact that winning money is awesome. Anytime you can do it, whether or not you're Ryan Norberg or you're a regional driver who maybe is just trying to get their toes wet and maybe get their first dollar from racing go-karts. But with this race, I think is undoubtedly the second biggest race we have in the country. I think it goes to, if you look at the entry list throughout, I don't say the lack of pro drivers that are able to make it to this race or the teams that couldn't make it to this race, but I think it's actually what stands out to me, Emery, to answer your question more from earlier about the entry list, is the added newcomers to that senior field that we haven't seen in the past.
Yeah, well, it's the one-off drivers I think see a lot of value in this type of race, right? Like you look at the Kai Hunters of the world. They came over for one Summer Nats race. They're coming over for IAME Grands. Parker DeLong. We haven't seen him since Vegas last year. He's been busy racing Trans Am and other stuff over the course of the last couple of seasons. You go down the list as well. I mean, guys that would never run a KA race. Brandon Carr is racing both categories. Hayden is racing both categories. Like the guys that have something to gain from running an extra category, from winning money, make that decision to go. But I think what makes this so special to win, the money certainly plays a part, and I think even the guys like Joe or like Ryan that will have some of the money coming back to the team or will have kind of the monetary value kind of diluted a little bit, like it still means something to them. But ultimately, kind of the intensity of the race, the level of competition is what brings it forward. And I mean,
for sure.
And like ultimately, you watch IAME Grands, and this is kind of the last point I wanted to bring up to you guys. I think last year we had bigger numbers. I think it's the one thing I will say that has me a little bit down on this weekend is like we've seemingly kind of put it at an awkward spot, I would say, on the calendar. It's not in the heat of the summer. Like last year was right in the middle of the summer, which
that's exactly what I was about to get at as well. That's exactly what I was about to bring up too, because the scheduling of this year also worked out differently.
Yeah, so last year was like right in the middle of the summer, which weather-wise not great, but for like a budget standpoint, from like a reset standpoint, worked out pretty well, I would say, for most people. The second part is the 2 years ago, they had it in October, which was like a warm up to Supernats. And so you got a lot of the guys that were doing one-offs for Supernats at the time. Braden Eves was one of those guys. Justin Ataconis as well. Those guys came in and ran one more race before Supernats, and IAME Grands was the perfect opportunity for that. So you put it at the end of August, a lot of guys are just starting out school. A lot of guys are, a lot of parents are starting up with their kids going to school. Like it's a lot of logistics to figure out. And I think that combined with a little bit of marketing that could be improved, I think we could see the numbers grow from where it's at now. I think that Xterdi field being 19, I think some of the support categories, I know micro is only at like 12 or 13, which again, though makes sense. The kids, the support categories where the kids are younger, you don't want to pull them out of school right away to spend 3 extra days down in North Carolina, And it might not be a factor for all the national level guys, but there's guys in the mid pack, guys in the back of the field that aren't going to be filled out. So that's the one thing. But in terms of the prestige, the money of the event, I mean, it is as cool of an event as you're going to find in the U.S. And, I like seeing what Dalton did last year, seeing the intensity of it all, and really seeing like what this track has provided the last 3 years when it comes to the IAME Grand Nationals. Like you saw Connor Zilish win in K in 2021, 2022. Norberg won in 2021 and 22 for Xterdi. Like pretty much every race, every shootout race, and every like main event race on the senior side of things has had good results. And so that's my take on it. I think that as a whole, this race kind of this year's lost a little bit of the like magic, so to speak, on the entry list, but I still think it's going to be really good. And I guess the one last question I have on my end for you guys, and I hinted at it when we were talking to Dalton, is you have the two shootout layouts. Um, you have two chances to do something unique, something cool. Do you have any ideas? Do you have any suggestions on what one of those two would be that we haven't seen before, Alex? I mean, I know you have more experience at Trackhouse. If you have any thoughts on that.
I mean, it's tough. I having driven there a lot, I never really got a chance to do many of the alternate layouts. So I did like Dalton's idea, and it's not great for a shootout, I'd say, but maybe for the future, a completely backwards track house would be interesting. I think turn one would be sketchy, backwards, making it the last corner. But the rest of the track would race quite well. I think it'd have a lot of switchback opportunities. But for a shootout layout, we tend to go with the shorter, lap time sort of racetracks. I liked last year's backwards layout that we had in the pouring rain, um, with a bit of a cut through. That was pretty fun. Other than that, the layout that we're doing for heats 2 and 3, I actually quite enjoy. I think the racing's really, really good. Um, and then I really do enjoy the original shootout layout, the one that Paulie won. I think that shootout layout was really fun. It was interesting, but it definitely led to some awesome racing and carnage, which is to be expected in the shootout with a lot of money on the line. So I think if I had to maybe pick a layout, I'd say OG shootout layout from 2021.
Caleb, you have any ideas?
I really liked what we did last year a lot in both of the shootouts. So I mean, I think those two would work quite well because we didn't see them in the dry. So I think doing those shootout layouts would be nice, as well as the backwards would be cool to see as well. A kind of full track backwards would be nice. I think turn one being the last corner would be a little close, but I mean, again, the final turn at Trackhouse also is I guess it evens out. I'd be more worried about the last corner being turn one than turn one being the last corner. So yeah, I think that's some stuff that we could try for this year. But again, I know Eric and that entire Trackhouse team is going to be working, and they're going to come up with something interesting for us.
Yeah, I mean, in talking to Dan Brewer and some of the other guys at Trackhouse in the past, the question on that full reverse layout is into turn 11, going backwards, like the last corner, because you're going 65 miles an hour into heavy braking zone where you have a giant curve on the outside and fence not too far along from that. So you'd have to figure out some kind of barrier solution on that. But I do like the idea of going backwards. They were going to run it backwards. The first shootout they ever did in 2021, but they could never get the timing loop figured out. And then after that, safety concerns were raised and we never got to see it. So maybe that changes one year. Maybe it changes this year. I don't know the layout. I know no one that I've talked to knows the layout. So we'll be intrigued by that. Alex, I like your idea of the first shootout layout. We saw that come back as the second and third heat layout in 2022. Not great for more than about 15, 20 carts on track, but for a shootout race, it races really well. I think that I'd be surprised if we don't see that in at least one of the two shootouts. I have an interesting proposition, though, and it is what I call the outer loop layout, where you go around turn one, down the back straightaway, through the bowl, and then take the cut through between
Into the
turns.
last quarter.
Yeah. Make it
I like
track
it.
out. Make it Trackhouse Super Speedway.
I
If
like
we're
it.
gonna
That'd
do
be interesting.
a shootout race, a one-off race, 12 people, why not have some super speedway racing?
I
Because
like it.
it's just basically the one corner is the only one that had a lot of technicality to it. So, no, I think either way, there's a lot you can do with those alternate layouts, and we'll see what comes to fruition. But, IAME Grand Week, you guys flying on Thursday. Alex and Caleb, final thoughts for this episode, Caleb?
I'm just excited to get back out there. It was great to hear from Dalton. And I can't say I really had much of a week off because I was at TSRS this past weekend. But we're back at the national stuff. Excited to be back at Trackhouse. Excited to be back at North Carolina. Hopefully, finally try some. What do you call it, dude?
Shoreline?
No.
Cookout?
No, Cookout's overrated. The chicken strip place, dude, that we went to that one time. I didn't actually eat.
Bojangles.
Bojangles.
Yeah, you
Hopefully
got
try
like
some.
you got like
Anyways,
a fish fillet, bro. Like
hey, no interrupting. Hopefully try some Bojangles this weekend. That'll be nice. And hopefully see some good racing as well. So that'll be a good time. So I'm excited to get back out there. Maybe try some Bojangles. Maybe stay away from Cookout. Go visit Mama at Waffle House, and it'll be a good weekend.
I can't believe this dude just said Cookout was overrated.
It is, dude.
You know,
It's good
you
food,
said
but
you sound like a guy that prefers In-N-Out.
I prefer Whataburger, sadly. So
Okay, see, that's a valid opinion, but like we don't have to diss Cookout for it.
I
Anyways,
don't know.
though, Alex, don't diss Cookout. But what are you looking forward to this weekend?
Not Cookout.
I'm looking forward to Cookout. I'm not. There's
Scott.
nothing. No, there's nothing better. All right, because there's gonna be some late nights this weekend. We leave the track at let's say 11:30. You know what's still open? Cookout. And you know what I'm pay? You know I'm gonna pay for like 15 burgers, like $3. All right. Now, will I be regretting it in the morning? Potentially, but for that night, it is amazing. And so I think Cookout is elite. If it was in Florida, I'd go there more often. Um, Other than that, though, racing is gonna be good. I mean, there's not a much bigger spectacle. I don't. No, I'm gonna stick to that. Yeah, then shootout racing at Trackhouse for IAME Grands. I mean, there's something about the vibe. I don't know use the word aura, but I mean there is like a certain level of you walk through the pits, when everyone's changing their stuff before the shootout race, and you can kind of feel the energy throughout the grid, and it's something that you feel only at a couple races of the year. I'd say Supernats and IAME Grands, maybe a couple others. When there's that much money on the line for 12, 15 drivers to go out there and duke it out. So that I'm excited for. I'm excited for night racing in general. We'll get night racing 2 of the next 3 weeks at Trackhouse, so that's amazing. And then overall, we're gonna crown some Grand National champions. So there's not much better I can say.
Yeah, no, and no Carolina Ale House this week, so I'm not going to be there, and it's like a 40-minute drive from Trackhouse. But hey, I respect the Cookout opinion. You said it best. You get out of the track at 11:30. Can't go to most any place, but you can go to
You
Cookout.
can go to Waffle House.
No, look,
Yes.
Waffle House.
I'm over the arguing, bro. Let's wrap this up. Cookouts overrated.
All right,
Leave it at that.
all right. Anyways, so thank you very much for joining episode number.
Yeah, I've had it. Cookouts.
Anyways, this has been episode number 24 of KC Grid Talk. My name's Emery Lida. This guy in my right corner, we don't really talk about his opinions, but he is very, very useful to the show, and he'll be on the mic this weekend. Alex as well, on air, interviews, Mike, whatever.
Emery will be trying to race, so that'll be exciting.
Yeah, I'm not gonna lie. I saw the entry list and I was like, dang, it's tough. They're not the vice champion of the Trackhouse Motorplex karting challenge from last year, but it is pretty stacked
Emery,
competition.
I actually like your chances. I really do. I think you've had an up and down year, but a lot of it has been unfortunate. I think maybe sometimes pace hasn't been there, but on a track that I like your odds. I like your odds to make the shootout. I really do. I think I'm if you make the shootout, I'm definitely picking you.
Hey, I had this conversation with my dad last night. I was like, my goal for this year, it's been the first year that they had this race. I made the shootout, no problems. Raced my way in, good year. The next 2 years, 2022, I crashed out in the first heat with Jeremy Fletcher. Didn't make the shootout. The second year, or 2023, just not a good year. Didn't make it. So 2024, it's my time. I don't want to say where I'm going to end up, but we got faith in myself this year. Will that faith be realized? I mean, it could be delusional, could not be. We'll find out. But anyways, these guys will be good at their job. We'll find out if I'm going to be good at my job this weekend. As always, thank you for tuning in to episode number 24 of KC Grid Talk, previewing the IAME Grand Nationals. We'll be back next week, next Tuesday, 2 days before my 22nd birthday. we'll have
Bad day to
maybe
be a beer.
Sunday night, and I said unless it goes like incredibly mediocre, it'll be a bad time to be an alcoholic beverage. That's all I'm gonna say.
All
But
right.
anyways, episode number 24 of KC Grid Talk. I'm gonna stop talking before I get in too much trouble. We'll be back next week. Thank you, William Kim, for the early birthday shout out. Appreciate that. Good luck to William, and we will be back next week for more shenanigans, more kart racing coverage, and the wrap up of the IAME Grand Nationals. Thank you and good night.